There comes a time in a life of endless giving when you finally stand still and see the landscape for what it is. Not a garden you have tended, but a ruin you have built. For him, this was that time. He stood amidst the skeletal remains of a life constructed entirely for others. It was a hollowed-out cathedral to their comfort, a monument to their needs, and he was the lone ghost haunting its crumbling halls. He saw the foundation, cracked and broken, made from the bedrock of his own self-betrayal. He saw the walls, nothing more than piled stones of sacrifice, held together by a mortar of anxiety and the desperate need to be wanted. Every room was designed for a guest who had long since departed. The banquet hall, filled with the echoes of laughter he had provided while swallowing his own sadness. The bedrooms, furnished with the warmth he gave away, leaving him to sleep in the cold. He was the architect of a grand palace where he himself was never allowed to live, only to serve. For years, he had been the structural engineer of everyone else's world. He was the load-bearing wall for their insecurities, the roof that sheltered them from their storms, the open door they could walk through without ever needing a key. He mistook their reliance for respect, their need for love. He believed that if he just built it big enough, beautiful enough, strong enough, they would finally see him. Not the structure, but the architect. But they never did. When the inevitable decay of neglect set in, when the weight of their collective indifference became too much to bear, the entire structure groaned, shuddered, and collapsed inward. And when the dust settled, he was the only one trapped inside, buried, not under stone and wood, but under the crushing weight of a singular, devastating truth. No one was coming. No one was even looking. The world had not counted him out. They had simply never counted him at all. His absence would not create a void, only an inconvenience. They would simply find another shelter, another open door. And in the profound, deafening silence of his own wreckage, surrounded by the ghosts of their expectations, he finally understood. He had not been building a home. He had been digging his own grave. The turning point was not a thunderclap of rage. It was not a vow of vengeance whispered into the darkness. It was quieter, colder, and far more powerful. It was a silent shift in the tectonic plates of his soul. In the absolute stillness of his desolation, his hand, sifting through the debris, closed around something hard and real. A single, uncut stone. A cornerstone he had forgotten he possessed. The irreducible, sovereign core of his own being. The one piece of himself he had never managed to give away. Clutching it, he made a decision. Not a promise to the world, but a blood oath to himself. It was a moment of terrifying, radical accountability. He saw with chilling clarity that he had not been a victim of their thirst. He had been the one who handed them the cup. He had taught him he was a well, not a man. And so in the theater of his own mind, he unrolled a new blueprint. It was not drawn with the ink of hope, but etched with the sharp point of consequence. This design had no sprawling wings for guests, no welcoming foyers, no windows for the world to peer through. This was the blueprint for a fortress, a citadel of the self. Its lines were severe, its angles uncompromising. It was designed not for beauty, but for permanence, not for comfort, but for defense. Its purpose was singular, to protect the man who would live inside. He would no longer build a shelter for the transient. He would build a sanctuary for the eternal, his own soul. Then came the great work, the long, brutal, and utterly solitary period of construction. He vanished, not from the world, but into himself. This was not a retreat. It was a deployment to the most important front line, the landscape of his own interior. First came the demolition. With a sledgehammer of brutal honesty, he shattered the remaining walls of his codependence. He tore down the rotting framework of his need for validation. He pulverized the altars where he had sacrificed his own needs for the hollow worship of their approval. He worked under a starless sky, his only light the burning embers of his own quiet fury. Then he prepared the ground. He began to dig new foundations, deeper than he had ever imagined. He dug past the soft topsoil of public opinion, past the clay of cultural conditioning, past the fossilized remains of old wounds until he hit bedrock, the bedrock of his own non-negotiable truth. Into this, he drilled holes and laid a new frame, not of hope, but of steel, the cold, hard rebar of discipline. He became a master mason. He learned to mix the mortar, not of fleeting motivation, but of unwavering will. It was a harsh mixture, made of his own sweat, the salt of his own tears, and the grit of his unbreakable resolve. And with this, he began to lay the bricks, each one a boundary, placed with the precision of a master craftsman. He laid the brick that said no, and it was a full sentence. He laid the brick that said, "My peace is not for sale, and my time is not a commodity." He laid the brick that said, "I will trust your actions, not the memory of your potential." He laid the brick of unapologetic rest, the brick of solitude, the brick of choosing silence over the performance of engagement. They did not see this. They did not see the nights he spent studying the architecture of his own pain, learning its stress points and weaknesses. They did not see him callousing his soul from lifting the heavy weight of his own healing day after day. They did not see him installing the windows, thick, reinforced glass that only faced inward for the singular purpose of self-reflection. He was not building walls to shut the world out. He was building walls to finally keep himself in. He was furnishing the interior with things he had long forgotten: self-respect, silence, the sound of his own thoughts, the weight of a book, the joy of a craft done for its own sake. He was building a life from the inside out. His reemergence was not an event. There was no announcement, no ceremony. It was simply a change in the atmosphere. One day, people just noticed. The fortress now stood where the ruins had been. It caught the morning light in a way the old structure never could. It was not imposing. It was simply there, solid, silent, self-contained. Its strength was not in its height, but in its stillness. It radiated a power that did not need to be declared. And of course, they came, the ghosts from the past, drawn to this new, strange energy. They walked up to the gates of his new existence, holding their old, useless keys. They rattled the locks of guilt. They tried the passcodes of feigned concern. They knocked with the urgency of those who had grown accustomed to an open door. "You've changed," they said, their voices laced with the accusation of betrayal. "You're so walled off now, it's like we don't even know you. What happened to you? How did you do this? Show us." He looked at them not through a peer hole of fear, but from the high parapet of his own hard-won peace. And he offered them the one thing they could not manipulate, argue with, or diminish: a calm, unwavering silence. His silence was not an absence of words. It was a presence of strength. It was a mirror reflecting their own intentions back at them. It was a shield forged in the fires of his solitary work. He owed them no tour. He owed them no explanation. The blueprints to the architecture of his soul were not for public distribution. The fortress was the testimony. His peace was his power. And his life, the one he built brick by solitary brick, became an architectural masterpiece of the human will, a testament to the undeniable truth that the strongest structures are not built for the approval of others, but for the protection of one's own sacred ground. Now pick up your tools. Let the silent work begin.